Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Green Dragon podcast. Got a couple of really cool guests here today. My friend Rinju, he's been on the show once before, coming back on, and we're joined today with Colin, who's a good friend of Rinju's. Just kind of talk about like the good manly stuff, like how do we be men, the ideas of suffering, how do we embrace suffering, and then touch on this group that Colin and Rinju are part of called Anti-Fragile Fitness, something I'd like to join here soon. Um, so yeah, welcome to the show, Colin and Rinju.
Hey, thanks for having us. Very excited to be on today.
So Colin, can you give us a little bit of your background and like, your life goals, things you've been doing, kind of like who is Colin?
For sure. Yeah. So like most people, I started off as a gym bro. Early on, I just wanted to lift weights. I want to get big. I want to get jacked, lean, and I struggled with it. I was pretty weak up until a few years into lifting. I didn't bench a plate until a year and a half into training. I didn't squat two plates to depth until like 2.5 years of training. It was a very long journey for me. And then I noticed there's a clicking point. I started training a lot harder than everyone else, like significantly harder than everyone else in the weight room. And I blew up in strength. I got much bigger than most people. I went on a really bad bulk that got me really fat, but also made me really strong. And then once COVID happened, that caused the bulk to end. And I leaned out a decent bit and noticed I had a bit of muscle in my frame, as well as that strength that I acquired from the bulk. And,
Mhm.
I was a high schooler who got bullied. I just put it that way. I was a high schooler who had a lot of insecurities. I was scared. I didn't want to be weak. And that kind of led to this like crazy training mindset to where I was doing literally 7 days a week for a few hours a day in the gym. I was squatting 3 times a week. I was deadlifting 3 times a week. I was benching 3 times a week. My body was kind of breaking down, but I got really strong in the process. And so I'm here after kind of COVID was sort of ending with this strength, and I wanted to compete. And I loved it. I loved the process of training for it. I loved getting really, really strong. I loved, being really, really good at something. And I competed in a powerlifting competition. I had some decent numbers. Nothing too crazy, but I mean, I think I ended with a 600-pound deadlift, a 450 something squat, and then my bench was a poverty bench, it was like 240 something. It didn't go up, but it was a great learning experience, and it taught me that competition was something that I really really enjoyed, and I started training again. I kept on going, and then I noticed that I really enjoy the other aspects of training, not just lifting heavy weights, because lifting heavy weights, it gets boring after a little while. You don't really there's intensity, but you could only take it so far before your body literally starts tearing itself into pieces. And that's kind of what I experienced.
Mm.
And so I remember I had just moved out of into my own apartment, moved out. I was like, I think I was just barely 18 years old. I moved out, had a breakup with the girlfriend, and I started doing long distance runs, like
Mm.
very frequently long distance runs in addition to my weightlifting. Um, and that was very enjoyable for me. It was something, a different part of fitness that I could push myself in and really bring the intensity to that you can't do with lifting. And it just allowed me to suffer for hours straight, which was great because I mean you can only do so many squats before your knees and lower back start to scream at you and you can't get up the next morning, but you can push the intensity for these other things so much farther. And so I was working full time. I've been in the food industry. I got my business degree, so I've been like management for food industry. Currently with Chick-fil-A, so it was very wholesome Christian company, which is nice.
Yeah.
But I just kept on pushing myself. My time was literally I would work, and then the rest of my day was what can I do to discipline my body and mind further? And then I would sprinkle my girlfriend in there like once or twice a week, which she probably doesn't like all that much, but it's hard. It's one of those things to where it's like I can't sleep, I can't slow down unless I've checked these boxes of just intensity.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not healthy. I I I I think that there's much worse things to it.
Hmm.
But I don't think my way is like physically healthy compared to like, going on your jogs and doing some weightlifting 3 times a week.
Hmm.
But it's like the only way that I can like go to bed at night. Because I found myself when I moved out of my apartment, I developed this crazy insomnia to where I would just lay awake in bed for I'd probably end up getting like 3 hours of sleep a night because I was just so restless. I
Mm.
had so much extra energy. I had no clue what to do with it. And along
Yeah.
that time too, I don't know if you specifically are religious, but
Yeah.
I was being pulled out of my bed at night. I was literally like hearing things, and like it sounds really crazy, but like And I was an atheist. I was practically an atheist at the time too. Like I was not a practicing Christian. I was like waking up to like whispers in my ear, and like it sounds like schizophrenia, which hey, it might be. You know, maybe my base for being such a good lifter is schizophrenia. I don't know. Um,
The
but
secret,
it, yeah, pretty much schizophrenia and autism. It's the two things that propel athletes into greatness, right?
right?
Uh, but I just it was like this ridiculously dark period of my life because I just didn't have like an outlet. Um,
Mm.
I was doing my weightlifting, but I hadn't quite like really jumped into anything crazy yet. I was going to college, I was employed, but like not I still had way too much time on my hands. And so I had to fill it with something, and it was this intense physical exercise. And that
Mm.
was the only way that I was able to go to bed at night. So segue on like a little bit farther past that, I got a little bit healthier of a mindset. I noticed I was able to sleep a little bit better. And this, I was listening to Jocko one day, the Jocko Willing podcast, and he's always talking about jujitsu. And I was like, I think that might be fun. I kind of wanted, I was in my mind, I wanted to do striking, but I was a little scared. I don't want to get hit in the face. So I started with jujitsu. I did a trial class. And then after that trial class was over, I didn't show up for the next year. Um, it was one of those things to where it's like, wow, this is really fun. But I remember like I was in the shower after I actually couldn't drive myself home. I had to sit in the parking
Oh,
lot until the inflammation in my arms went down because of how like just how intense it was. I mean, going from like a gym bro who's used to like exerting himself 100% to like a jujitsu, which is like you flow, yes, you strain, but you pick and choose when you strain. I couldn't turn my neck, I couldn't move my arms. I was in the shower. I had an exercise-induced fever. I had flu symptoms from how hard I trained, and I was like, "This is incredible. I need to do more of this." Uh, which then led to me taking a year hiatus before I came back and started training fighting again. Um, but yeah, and that's where I am now. And there's a lot that happened after that year, in that year and a half of me starting training at the fighting gym, which is where I am now. But just to give like a brief overview, because there's lots of like ups and downs and like changes of mindset. That's sort of my story.
that's incredible. I mean, I kind of love how like the intense mindset you have because I don't know, you probably share this too, Ranger. It's just like I'm with you where like if I don't feel like I really worked myself super hard today, I don't feel like I can rest. Like I don't have the like I don't deserve it, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Why take a rest day when your whole week was spent resting ultimately, you know? It's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like, what's when an hour of your day is spent training, I don't think you've truly, I mean, that hour could be super intense, but like, I don't think you've earned that rest day. Like,
Yeah.
it has to be, you have to like, and like I said, there's ways that we move training around so that your body doesn't break down. But I mean, like most people, like their cheat meals and their rest days, they aren't earned. Like, they
Mhm.
are not earned at all.
Mhm.
And so like once you switch your mindset to like actually like putting in the work to like not to where you're like, oh, I might take a rest day, I might, enjoy my day. It's like you got to earn that. Your body has to need that rest day. Training is fun. It's like you shouldn't want to take time away from training.
Yeah, I like that a lot better. The idea of instead of looking at it as like earning a rest day, kind of now I've got my points. Like now I can relax for this day, instead looking at it as all right, now I need this rest because of the work that I'm aiming myself towards.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you start shifting the mindset, that rest day becomes painful because you know what it's for.
Mm-hmm.
The point of that rest is for your mission, is for staying on the path that God's given you, is for um, is for that work that you've set out to do. And
For
so
sure.
instead of having the mindset of like I'm eating these calories because I need to do this, I need to be able to have the energy to put in the work that is required of me. Um, it's a much more um, fulfilling process than kind of counting your workouts until now I can, like I don't know, like it's kind of like I was talking to a friend about being sick. I
Mm-hmm.
said like how I feel miserable when I get sick and I'm just kind of like low energy and I can't really go to work or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like I really enjoy it because I can kind of relax a bit more and maybe go on a walk. It's like I can't
Yeah.
understand that no idea. Like when the points in my life when I've been the most miserable has been when I haven't had a clear purpose to follow. I haven't had a clear path. I haven't had that work.
Mhm.
Like why I love being in anti-fragile athletes. I can have people who've spent far more time dedicated to understanding sports science, like what Arthur and like Nick Tax, what they understand about the human body, far exceeds what I may ever get to. So they can just plug in a program. They can tell me um, where to give my energy properly, and I can just throw it in.
Yeah.
I can just throw into that and have the kind of, I don't know if it's a peace of mind, but the kind of the wholeness of mind to recognize that I'm giving what I need to give, and I know where I can give even more, as
Mhm.
Yeah.
opposed to looking for the opportunities to rest.
Sure. One of the things you said there to where it's like the peace of mind. Uh,
Mhm.
one of my coaches, he had a good point. He's like, when you're in the cage fighting and I'm shouting commands at you, my goal is to act as sort of like the pilot to your body. Obviously, you're throwing the punches, you're throwing the kicks, you're doing the takedowns. But when I'm shouting these commands at you in terms of like what you need to do to advance your position or get out of a position, it's like my goal is to give you my to be the pilot, because like obviously we can't train for every circumstance we're in.
Mhm.
We have to like having someone who knows what they're doing, who can expedite all the knowledge required to give you the edge is 100% needed. It's like, I mean, it took me probably 5 years to get a really good base of knowledge for lifting exercise science and understanding of what goes into like training. But it took me probably 2 months to think I understood what goes into exercise science and training. And it was one of those things where it's like you're a kid, you know everything, and
Yeah.
you don't, and then you fail, and then you think you know everything, and then you fail over and over again. So having good mentors and good coaches who have walked the walk and can now talk the talk is 100% needed. I mean, if you look at it as like if you look at your training as this linear path where you're always going to be making gains every second of the journey, you're a fool. Like if you try and go at it alone, the journey is probably going to be 3 times longer than what it would be without a good coach. I
Yeah.
have seen what good coaches can do in terms of training, and I've also seen people plateau for years, like literal years. I've seen people take still like high doses of steroids and still not make gains because they don't have good training or a
Yeah.
good understanding of just the pure basics behind it. The fundamentals have to come first, and then you can add on the fluff. Um, but if you don't have someone who can help you get the fundamentals, or if you just aren't really gifted with understanding of exercise science, which I'd say 99.5% of the population doesn't have a decent understanding inherently. I mean, maybe if you went to school for it, you'd have a better understanding than some people. But at the same time, how often do we meet doctors who seem to fail at being doctors, or
Mhm.
physical trainers who ultimately fail at being physical trainers? Um, and we've all seen the fat physical trainers at their gym, like
Yeah.
these physically stunted people who are trying to teach, but like who wants to learn from the fat physical trainer? I mean, like I said, we're all humans.
Yeah.
Inherently, have inherent value because we are made in Christ's image. But at the same time, if when it comes to like something as black and white as like, am I going to learn from you? I want the person to have demonstrated the ideals. And when it comes to Arthur, the 210-pound Muay Thai fighter who lifts more than I do, and like I said, I am a strong, like I was a really strong power lifter.
Yeah.
I've squatted 500 for a double. I've
Okay.
deadlifted 655, but I've trained with Arthur and he's stronger than me. You know, our lifts, like there's some lifts where I'm better than him, but there's a lot of lifts that he's stronger than I am. And so that speaks a lot when you can have your foot in both worlds, like Muay Thai and powerlifting,
Mhm.
and just being a stud athlete, like that speaks a lot to like yourself as a person, your hard work, your understanding. But he also like he's a scholar at the same time too. So he's
Mhm.
he's a great role model and an incredible coach.
Yeah. How did you guys get connected in the first place? Um,
Yeah.
there's some of you guys in AFA that like I see you guys some of you guys as the veterans, these kind of mythological figures that have been there since the beginnings of time. And I came like last summer, and I've just kind of been slowly like, especially with my travels, I've met a number of people in the group throughout the country. But yeah, I actually don't know how you got connected with anti-fragile athletes in the first place, or with Arthur maybe before even it was a
Yeah. So
program in the first place.
so it was, I think honestly it was like 2020, and I was off of school, or I had like, so my senior year consisted, I was really smart my senior year. I was in school for an hour and a half out of the day. And then the rest of my classes were like college classes, like online classes, and then college classes at the physical campus. So my senior year, like I was ultimately like, it was practically like a year of college just off the bat, which is great. Um, but I had a lot of free time on my hands because I mean it was pretty much class at your own pace. And when school ended, when my high school stopped like having us in because COVID, I had a lot of time on my hands. And so I was like, I have a lot of time on my hands. I'm a motivated kid. I'm only doing body weight stuff. It's like I need to do something so I can like not want to kill myself, which it was like I'm gonna be honest, like looking at I don't know what they did for you guys, but in Wisconsin, like they shut everything down. Like everything was closed, and I had parents who essentially were very against me being outside. Like I didn't see my girlfriend for 3 months because they asked me to, and it was a really rough period of my life. I mean, so I had all this extra energy, so I'm like, I'm gonna start a podcast. And Arthur, I want to say he was like the fifth or sixth guest. There's a guy, he followed me on Instagram. I followed him back, Blood and Rain. I'm like, this guy's some cool content. He has some stuff of him training on there. He's a physical stud. He seems to be much more intelligent than I am, and he is much more intelligent than I am. Like there's some things I have a decent understanding with, but I'll be the first to admit that there are many smarter people than me in this world. And my goal of having the podcast was bringing them all together so I can learn from them, and so the people that I had, that the 5 viewers that I had, could learn from them too. Try and spread the love and wealth a little bit. And so I had him on the podcast. We had like a 2.5 hour long discussion. Um, Incredibly based conversation. He was living in San Francisco at the time. He was working, I think, like 90 hours a week to make ends meet, and still training, still getting the work done. And from there, it led up him having me on his podcast, and then I had him on my podcast again. And then when he moved to Chicago, we started like occasionally training together. We had a few workouts together. I would drive down at like, because Arthur's a nocturnal animal who wakes up at ungodly hours in the morning. Um, I remember I had to leave at 3 in the morning to make it to like the time to train. Like we started the workout at like 4:45 in the morning, and then we stopped at 11:30 in the morning. That's how long we trained.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
it was the most fun I had. Like it was such a blast. Um and this is after like probably a year and a half of knowing him when we first like met up in real life. And that led to like him, we had a podcast in person, and then worked out a few more times, and then he invited me. I went to his wedding with Victoria and met more of the AFF guys, and that was yeah, it's been very spaced out. Like I would have honestly, if Arthur, like if I could have like shared like an apartment with Arthur, I think that would have been like the most fun I think I've ever had. I think just like the masochistic mindset when it comes to training, with like compared with like the scholar mindset that he has, I think it could have made a world-class athlete out of anyone. But it's been good. So he's like acted as sort of like a mentor intermittently throughout like my time in AFF. And it's great too because it's like we don't have to hang out or like talk once a day to still be friends. It's like we might go a few weeks without really seeing each other, talking to each other, and then it picks up. But he's a really good guy, and it's really funny too because like I had his wife on on my podcast before so I had them both separately before they even knew each other, and then they ended up getting
Whoa.
married. So yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
I don't know if I'm just this like secret matchmaker, like people come on the podcast and they find love or something like that. But
Right.
it was hilarious how that worked.
Yeah.
Like it blew my mind because Arthur calls me up one day. He's like, "Hey, Colin, I have something you want." "Hey, Colin, I have someone that I think you should meet." And then it's Victoria, and it just blew my mind. Like it was really cool, but it made a lot of sense because I mean they are meant for each other. Like
Yeah, yeah.
simple as that. But yeah, no, he's been a really good mentor over the last few years. Mentor, friend. And then watching him get married a few months ago was like probably the most fun I think I've ever had. Just like I think that real friends like celebrate each other. Like it's when
Mhm.
other people win, they win too because
Yeah.
you care for the person.
Mhm.
Versus like this toxic mindset nowadays to where you see people win or people see you win, and then because you aren't like them anymore in their own failure, they sort of hate you for it, which was like
Yeah.
not. Yeah, it's just terrible. I mean, I don't. It probably has something to do with like finding a group and surviving, like group of people like yourself. Like there has to be similarities like inbred in us through like years of evolution, which I don't know if I believe it or not. It's one of those things to where it's like it's
Yeah.
not a good, and nowadays it's not a good thing, but we
Yeah.
see these people and they hate you because you aren't like them anymore.
Mhm.
And because you grew, because you aren't sad, depressed, living the lifestyle that they lived, hating yourself, but pretending to be a good person. And so like watching him get married and him watching my successes in my own life too, like he's a really good person. And I'm very lucky to have him as a coach.
Yeah, that idea of envy is such a perverted. It's like perverts that really healthy tendency towards competition that men have,
Mm.
Yeah.
right? Because it's like you're not even competing with this person.
Yeah.
You're kind of saying like, oh, I'm already losing, so actually you're the problem because I'm
Yeah.
losing,
Mhm.
Yeah.
as opposed to being like, I just gotta go get better. You know, like there's a joke, the movie Whiplash. Have you seen that?
Yes, sir. Great
Yeah,
movie.
and like some people argue, like, well, the point of the movie was to say, watch out about getting too far into obsession. But it's like every guy watches it and it's like, I need to work harder.
Yeah.
I need to do more. You know, like
Uh-huh.
I need to like work on my craft till I bleed. You know that's where I want to be happy, and that's the aspect you should have with competition. Like men can compete and have mutual respect, and in fact, they're kind of tied together.
Yeah.
You know, like and you can have the humility to recognize maybe you're going to compete with somebody who is far advances you. Like Tom, when I'm working out with you in the morning, like I know I'm not going to hit your lifts,
Oh.
but I still look over and I'm like I'm getting there. I'm
Oh yeah.
gonna get there, you know. And that's I think that's that sense of competition. It's incredible fuel, but
Yeah.
it can become really perverted when fear enters in.
Mhm.
You know, like I've definitely chased the same girl as like friends of mine, and sometimes I've done it poorly and let fear kind of take over and decide like I'm gonna destroy this guy. That's the plan.
Yeah.
But also like one time our friend Chris, like him and I were chasing after the same girl, and one day we went for a walk, and it's like, you know, we both like this girl. We must have something great about ourselves. So
Yeah. Hey.
and neither of us actually ended up dating her or anything. And we became really, that was like the beginning of our friendship, like for real.
Really?
Yeah, like when we really became friends was just from that conversation. And it came from that place of competition where it's like we don't know where this is going to end up, but like I can have respect for you because I know that you're like there's something got to be something in you if
Mhm.
you're even like worth being in this competition with me.
Yeah. I
And
think the worst thing you can do when someone like makes leaps and like strides is like sort of disconnect from them as like a person. You start to like view them as the enemy almost.
Mhm.
When in
Yeah.
reality, I mean, like, so there's this guy in my gym who was a much better grappler than I was. And in the beginning of my like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, I hated him for it because I would get tapped out probably 20 times in 3 minutes. He had this Darce choke, and combined that he was a really good, like, he was a college wrestler. He would just destroy me, and I started to hate him for it. Um, and at a certain point, I did detach and realized that, that was the most immature, childish thing I could do. When in reality, I could learn from him and work with him.
Yep.
And now
Yeah.
it's to the point where he's able to show me things to tighten up my training to make me better.
Mhm.
Instead of like the beginning when because he was better than me, he was a much better athlete than I was. I disliked him for it. There's always something you can learn, even if you don't have to be best friends with the person, but if you hate them for their leaps and bounds in becoming better at XYZ, you're completely in the wrong. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
When in reality, like when you can learn from them, when you can set aside, that infantile feeling of this person has this toy and it makes me mad. At that point, I mean the amount of information, knowledge, growth that you can gain because they've obviously gotten somewhere because you're jealous of where they're at. You
Mhm.
you can add that to your own arsenal of tools and become better for it. And it doesn't mean you have to be buddy buddy with the guy, but you can have a respect for them. You can have a camaraderie for them.
Yeah.
You can grow off each other. And hey, it might turn into a friendship, it might not, but to view them as the enemy because they've won or you think they've won, it makes no sense.
I
No
mean, it's
sense at all.
satanic, right?
Yeah.
You know, like the hatred of virtue essentially is what it
Ooh.
comes down to.
It's
Like
communist.
you're hating them
Yeah.
because yeah, it's
It
communist.
is.
I mean, it's Satan looking at God and saying, I have hatred towards you because you are God,
Mm.
not because of any perceived evil God inflicted upon Lucifer, but because he is good and he is greater than me. I hate that. It's a
Yeah.
satanic tendency
Wow.
and it's evil. And I mean, I think
Wow.
it's and you see it generally, it's in weaker men, and it's in men who for some reason are afraid of the notion of competition. I know, like when I was younger, my brother was super competitive, and I knew whatever he wanted to compete me with in, I was gonna lose. Just like that's why he would pick this. Like, this is how we grew up. And so I started getting this mentality of like, I don't compete. That's not what I do. I back out of those things and I'm better than that. Like I stand above that. And I started realizing like it was just total pride coming in, and sometimes you're gonna look at someone maybe you're feeling envious towards, and maybe realize this as something that you don't want to chase. Like I've got a friend who graduated from Harvard Law 2 years ago, and he's like he's got talents and things that I will never even understand, and I don't I don't plan to. I don't plan to go into law.
Yeah.
So I can admire him in that, and if I let the envy kind of convince me it's something that I need, but I'm not going to chase either, puts you in an awful place. So sometimes just admiring talents and people that you're not even competing with, you have to kind of recognize you're never going to compete with them in a certain field, in a certain profession.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
satanic.
And outside of that too, there's the envy of competition. But I mean, if you look at too, I think that there's also this envy of virtue. When and I saw it in myself too, when I was pretty anti-religion, and I was just this like literally, I think I was going to kill someone. Like I think I was on a trajectory to take someone's life. I remember like just sitting in class, just hoping for the opportunity for one of these kids just to push me a little too far so I could like actually snap. And it was this dark, terrible period of my life. I was literally just like addicted to being angry. Like I was the dopamine you got from just this rage. And like I said, I was pretty strong at the time too. I wasn't a good fighter, but it's like I just wanted to I wanted to snap because I was so mad at all these people who had like pushed me around when I was younger. And ultimately it was this really immature line of thought too. But I remember at the same time, like we have this envy of people who are better than us, physically. But I would look at these people, these kids who had like literally like the homeschooled Christian kids who are good people, genuinely good people. And as a person who was so like I was fully in that like dark area, I hated them for it. I saw people who were like joyous and like filled with love, like and was similar to how many atheists act nowadays. I hated them for it without even knowing them, without having any reason, any real reason to dislike them. It was the virtue that like made me turn my nose up at them. And having time to grow and realize that and look back at it, it makes sense looking at like today's current like political spectrum. We see people, we us people who to try and act good, we try and live virtuous lives. We miss the mark, but we try our best. There's an actual movement out there to hurt and attack us.
Yeah.
And I don't understand it fully because we have all the guns. We're the physically strong, fighters at the same time. But there's people who, if they could, they would uh take take it out on us fully. There's countless people who, if they could like get away with it, they would snap their fingers. The only reason they're considered good people by today's society is because they haven't acted on it because they're too weak and afraid to. There's
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that's what how we label people as good or bad in today's society, whether they do an action or don't do an action. But in reality, I mean, if you look inside at a lot of people who are labeled good by society, I think ultimately they're just really evil cowards who are too afraid to act on their own choices. Number one, because of the good people in this world who would put them away and stop it. But number two, because they hate strength because they don't have it, but because they hate strength, they can't act on their own insecurity and just selfishness at the same time.
Hey, look
Which
at
is
most of
ultimately
these school shooters, right? Like these mass shooters. They're guys who, I mean, it's they live really tragic lives because they live like this learned victimhood that they've taken on, and then they kill a bunch of people, and they usually kill themselves, or they kind of death by cop.
Yeah.
They don't. It's a self annihilation moment that they're like they can't even live with that act of violence in a certain way. It has to kind of something has to snap, and they have to almost it is that sort of mentality. I've definitely been there as well. Like I just hope I can be imprudent right now. I hope I can have the excuse to. It's kind of the rest day mentality. Going back to that, like, oh, I hope I can like not be virtuous right now. Maybe I hope if I just get the opportunity and the right excuse, I can convince myself that I don't need to be virtuous.
But it's very hard because
Yeah.
us as humans, we have excellent bullshit
Yeah.
detectors. And so as good as it
Yeah.
feels to be a sinful, wretchful creature, at the end of the day, you're looking at your hand, you're looking at the hit, almost blood. I mean, because ultimately that's what we're slowly killing ourselves when we sin, when we do these
Yeah.
harmful acts for ourselves. And it's a what have I done type mindset. And you can always come back from it. You miss the mark this one day, you can always try harder the next day. But it's like after that night of partying and being obviously you're not depraved in the sense of, like committing terrible acts immediately, but at the same time you're surrounding yourself with really bad people doing acts that aren't pushing your physical body, the future of your family further. And it's like it's a separation. You get like a brief separation. You can kind of see what it feels like to be separated from God, which essentially is what hell is. Um and I always notice like it's a failure of mine that we repeat these things. We go back to the sinful ways, but it's like when those nights do happen, and it's like my friend is driving me home after the night of clubbing, and it's like the only thing that I feel is number one, you're drunk because you fucking had way too many drinks, but it's just sadness. Even when you are as intoxicated to where it's like you are unable to operate a motor vehicle and you are pretty much unable to fend for yourself because that's how drunk you are, there's still that voice in the back. And I don't know if other people have this too. I don't think many other people have this because I've talked to people, but I always have this voice in my back of my head that just like is repeating, like I am a sinner, like how I have fallen short of the grace of God.
Yeah.
And even like I said, like even people think that like 8, 9 drinks is gonna like take care of that voice. Like even still, like it's still talking to me at that point.
Yeah.
Like we have excellent BS detectors.
Mhm.
We know even if we can ignore it in like the short period of like the short for a short period of time, we still know that we have fallen short. And then once you let yourself down 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times, it really takes a toll on yourself, your psyche, your body, your mind, your relationship, your faith. It's hard. It's hard to come back from that. We're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
If we make sin a habit, we'll continue sinning. But if we make faith, virtue, physical discipline a habit, the leaps and bounds that we can make and the good that we can do upon other people, because like at the end of the day we won't have our physical bodies, and when we're 50 years down the line we might be healthier than the other person, but like at the end of the day ultimately that doesn't matter. What does matter is the good that you imparted upon other people, and have you made other people like followers of Christ. Like that's the most important thing. Like that's the number one thing. And if I were to look at my life when I'm like about to die and see like the harm that I've caused, it would be I think that it would be very easy for me to understand why I wasn't getting into heaven, like with that hindsight. So it's like if we can avoid all that and live lives to where it's like where you can say like without a doubt I'm getting into heaven because as much as I have failed, I've always picked myself back up again and tried harder. I think that's a very beautiful thing.
I 100% agree. Like I in school I'd always like make sure I didn't stay up too late at like dances and stuff because I wanted to like train the next day. Like I understand like too like sometimes if you get a little too rowdy on the dance floor, like I was like, was I really being a model of virtue there? Like was I just too rowdy, And like you wish you almost hadn't been there. Like
100%.
because it wasn't worth it, like you didn't want to you have all your friends that you love so much and you're like you don't want to be a bad example to them. I think that's probably the hardest thing, at least for my life, is like feeling like you hurt the people that you love. I think that's like especially when you start to grow in like the faith and understanding like what Christ brought us, and like you want to be that example to others and you want to bring that life to him of him to others. And when you fail at that and you hurt someone that you're trying to help, I think that's honestly the worst feeling. Because deep down that you could have done better, but you took shortcuts along the way that you didn't perform when the time came. And I don't know, I feel like that's what keeps me in like the drive a lot is like I don't want to let someone down.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you guys feel the same way?
I think I think most people when they hear that, their inclination is kind of be like, no, it's you did fine, you're good enough,
Yeah.
but the greatest of saints, like men who, like you could almost, most people would look at them and say they've never sinned in their life. But all they talk about is how they want to spend their entire life in total repentance to God. Because part of like what holiness is recognizing how the fear of the Lord, right? Like you are not God. You are not the measure of goodness. And your failings become so much more like clear to your new eyes. When God gives us you new eyes, you can see your failings so much clearer. And I think especially as men, like the fear of failing others and the sorrow that comes from when you recognize like you failed other people. Um, that's a good thing, because if you don't have that, and the responsibility we take on in our lives and the path God's giving us, we'd become pretty psychotic people. If we didn't own those failures and let them be sources for repentance, you know, and keeping out the ego and pride of kind of like focusing on, oh, I failed this thing, as opposed to the failure itself, focusing on the sin and focusing on the cleansing that God can give us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the failure too, it might not be, it's not always the action. It's also a lot of times like leading by example, you know, the what you're setting for other people to watch you like do. You know, how often do you do something that like might not be inherently viewed as like a negative thing, but ultimately you're setting a really bad example for the people around you. I mean, whether it's fathers being gluttons or how you talk around other people, how you act. I mean, if you're truly a Christian, you identify as a Christian, you understand, you have to understand that the example that you set as a Christian is absorbed, and people are watching you for that reason. They want to see whether is this thing actually real? Is this Christian actually a good person? And try and like really working to give them as many reasons to like view it as like an ultimately good thing, I think is a responsibility that a lot of people don't take. When Christians are at the club, when Christians are cussing, when Christians are acting degenerates, it really does. It doesn't tarnish what Jesus is, but it tarnishes the view of what Jesus and Christians are as a whole. The view, not the truth, none of the truth, because we are all sinful creatures at the end of the day, and God is perfect man, perfect God. But when people see this person who identifies as a Christian, goes to church, who is a Christian, not acting like a Christian, it gives them more reasons to not convert themselves eventually, which I think is almost of equal importance as to avoiding sin. I can't think of the exact quote off the top of my head, but it was the Bible quote of it is better for a millstone to be tied to your head than to cause another person, like lead another person away from God ultimately. And I think that speaks a lot, like a huge volumes to today's culture and acting as role models, and not just being a decent person who attends, you know, mass or church on the weekends, but someone who like lives a virtuous lives, someone who lives a good life, a disciplined life. What was missing for me from my, and I haven't really thought of this in a really long time, but like when I was converting and I was really struggling with it, I really struggled because most of the Christians that I saw were slobs. Like it was a really sad environment. And
Yeah.
and the beautiful thing is this, I think AFF is one of the like the leading pinnacles of what Christianity should be. It's where you have these strong, virtuous, disciplined fighters. But ultimately, when I was looking at like the Christians at my church, it's like you have a bunch of really sad looking people who I can't speak to what their lives look like outside of that, but they live lives of gluttony, laziness, and that's all a part of us at some point. But
Comfort's their God.
yeah,
Comfort's
exactly.
the one they're worshiping, like mammon, you know?
Yeah. And the scary thing is, it's like if they're that lazy, that undisciplined, it's like what would it take for them to turn away from their God? Like, what would it take for them to turn their backs? But and I think that it's a lot of times the only reason they haven't is because they haven't been given that temptation at that scale yet. You know, they're lazy, they're sloths, but at the same time, it's like, what is keeping them faithful? It's not discipline. I think that faith becomes their comfort, like you said, it becomes um a source of their comfort as it should be. But when your whole life is comfort, you know, there's what is it at that point? And so that was my struggle, because it's like I saw a bunch of these like physically sad, weak people, pathetic, even pathetic, who would like, I think would like, it's like when I was looking at these like people in my church, it's like, how many of them would stand up and stop the person who's coming in to shoot up the church? Any of them?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe 2%. I want to be surrounded by studs. I want to be surrounded by people who I look up to, who are better than myself. And
Yeah.
the good thing about like the it's sort of a negative thing too, but ultimately I think it's a really good thing. It's like you have all these like the having I don't even know what the word for it. I hate the word ortho bros, but if you look at Instagram, it's all these like Orthodox Christians who are fighters, studs, um, who might not be who might not understand the picture as a whole, who might not have the humility yet, but that ultimately I think was a really good thing for the faith and just being faithful as well, because it showed men that they didn't have to be a testosterone less blob of a human. They could be, they could be something else. And so I'm very happy that that switch has been made. As much like as there is work to be done in the community with people like developing like, all right, like obviously being half naked on Instagram 24/7 and throwing my lifts and talking about how great I am, that's not a good thing. Um, but I think you can build off of that and like teach humility at a certain point and help people become better in those senses while having that, base of discipline as well too. So it's been really cool to see. Very cool to see. Phenomenal actually. And I think that was one of the reasons why I'm here right now and not this red-pilled atheist living in his mom's basement.
You moved upstairs, yeah.
Yeah, just a bit upstairs.
Yeah.
I'm on the ground floor right now. I just got to get a bit
Nice.
higher.
Yeah, the college that Tom and I both went to, here in Wyoming, it's so it's a liberal arts school. Like the first class you take is a 21-day backpacking trip in the Teton Wilderness. It's outside of Alaska. It's the most isolated place in the lower 48 states. And the kind of men that we were able to have the chance to surround ourselves with are the kind of people that kind of took for granted that sense of discomfort being part of life, and in the sense that just like took it as like this is what it means to live and exist and to thrive. If you want to uh, live the good life, like you can't let comfort rule you, and it becomes glaringly obvious when you desperately try to chase after that, and you got to walk to classes like a mile and a half in the snow.
Yeah.
like why am I even doing this if if I'm trying to live for life of pleasure? And were you on you're on the retreat with us or senior year?
Yep.
Oh,
Byzantine.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's this priest. He's actually he's a pastor out in Las Vegas now. But he was in LA at the time. He came, and there's a bunch of us guys did a week-long desert retreat where we went into we're in Utah, or
I think we were.
yeah,
Yeah.
down in the desert in Utah, and it was a silent retreat, praying the Jesus prayer, and for a week. And this priest he's like
Mass.
yeah, he's Jack.
Yeah.
And he likes to box as well, and he's super brilliant too. I mean, he gets up at like 4:30 in the morning to study for 2 hours every morning, and he's got like 5 kids as well, and like like, but he's a really disciplined kind of guy, and really super holy and prayerful. And by the end of the retreat, when we finished the silent part, we found like these huge rocks in the desert, and just were like,
yeah.
just lifting them in a circle, and it's like, and he's like, oh, this is so fun,
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, we hadn't really, like, most of the guys afterwards are saying this, like, the sad part is just not knowing priests who are supposed to be the leaders of your Christian community, not knowing priests who we can look to as masculine. Like you can say like, yeah, this holy, is a good man, and you don't. I think you don't actually have to necessarily be masculine to be holy. I think that there's something really incredible about the faith. Something about going to the place where you see people who are like really soft and weak and even undisciplined in certain ways, and still be astounded at saying like, but I've also seen such virtue from them that only because it's come from God, and He gives His graces however He pleases.
Yes.
We're on our calendar. We're in Lent now, and our chaplain here he reminds us like more you're fasting and this disciplines you're taking on. ascetic, athletic, it comes from the same word.
Mm.
When you're taking all these practices, it doesn't do anything for God.
Mhm.
Like he's giving us the chance to be disciplined, like because it's good for us.
Mhm.
Like it's a gift to us to be able to like work on being disciplined. Um,
100%.
but
Yeah,
it's
it's a
nice.
blessing to
It
suffer.
is good for to have masculine, strong, disciplined men leading your community.
I agree with what you said. There's always there has to be a spectrum, not the gay spectrum, but there has to be a spectrum of men and people, soft people, people who aren't leaders. I think that those people are still needed for society, needed for the church, and obviously Christ welcomes everyone, and everyone has a place in God's church. Um, but yes, no, I completely agree. There's a range of people who are perfect the way that they were intended to be, made in God's image perfectly. Even if that's not who like people that we look up to. Not It almost sounds too Darwinian, but it's like there's gonna be like a warrior class. There's gonna be people who aren't leaders, people, and there's gonna be kings. There's a place for everyone. There's a
Yeah,
reason
it's
why everyone,
hierarchy.
yeah, there's a reason why everyone is not a king, but they still have value that I can't bring. I'm never gonna be a nurturer. I am never going to be as soft as my future wife. Like I'm never going to be able to like nurture someone up like that. I'm not going to be a healer. I wish I could be, and I think that I can certainly get better at it, but that's just a skill that I just can't do. It's just one of those things where it's like I am geared towards hard action and intensity, and that doesn't pair well with being a person who is open, like who is it's easy for him to be compassionate because
Mm.
that's something that I struggle with. I you can certainly work at it. You can certainly get better at it, but to understand, like I think that there is like a place where you understand that like it is. I am not going to be the person who is the healer at the end of the day. Um, as much as I can get better at it if I have to be, and like increase my skills, there's a person down the street who is born with that gift more so than I am, and who is finding their way in the church and in their life, to have that be how they bring Jesus to other people's lives. So we all have a place.
Yeah, we do. Isn't it
Yeah.
interesting too? It's like I forget what exactly, but essentially saying that God works through us in mysterious ways that we
Yes.
don't see. But then when we look back on everything, it's like, oh wow, that actually did work out really well. But at the moment, it may not seem like the person that you think should be like a hardcore whatever isn't being one right now. You feel like, well, aren't you like not stepping up to the plate? But
Yeah.
sometimes people have something else going on that they're dealing with, like an invisible battle, that actually might bring out something way better in the future that we don't see at the moment. But I feel like it's easy. I feel like I think like us three, we all have that inner drive towards like the intensity. And then I think sometimes when we feel like someone else that isn't as intense, we think, oh, they should be. It's not so much that we actually think they should be, but it's because we're trying to validate our own intensity.
Yes. Yes. It becomes egotistical.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's one of my vices too. I struggle with judging other people off of that. It's it's hard to it's way too easy, unfortunately, for me to look at someone who isn't, intense in the gym, who isn't this person who craves discipline, and to turn my nose up at them. And that's a vice that I've been really, that's something that it's so deep ingrained into me after all these years of just thinking that way, that that's something I'm trying to beat out of myself. And it's become, in just talking with people and like talking to them about their own lives, it's become a lot easier to understand the value that they have. Um, I think, I mean, the church is a hospital for people who need to be healed.
Yeah.
And I think that realizing that you are the first in line, like that's a good first step in understanding that, you know, there's beauty in people because of their imperfection and because they're not perfectly the same. We're all independently gifted with different strengths, weaknesses. And once you can see the big picture and see how it kind of all gets put together, as much as you still can't see the big picture because God works in mysterious ways, how can I understand the exact desires of this omnipotent, omnipresent being who doesn't inhabit time and space like we do, who is everywhere in history at once,
Mhm.
now and forever? You aren't, it becomes so ego driven to think that you can understand God's will at that point.
Yeah.
And what the Satanists want you to do is to think that you are God. when in reality it's like you are a fragile flesh mech operated by a skeleton that can break so easily, that can die at a snap of a fingers. And the only thing that makes that beautiful is the fact that God made you in his image and gave you a soul. Like that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
you are only here because of the grace of someone who you can't compare to. Aside from that grace. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's to look at our life of discipline or to look at our gifts and virtues
Mhm.
as anything but gifts. Um, Often we'll see, like I see in my life, God will afflict me with something to help me to remind me that this is only coming from Him. Um, Looking at a life of virtue and discipline not as something that makes you special in the least, but something that it's a really big task. He's
Yeah.
given us a strength. Like now it's come to the point of like, what are you gonna use it properly? Like, are you gonna be on the path?
Mhm.
And it just having the strength, having those talents, puffing up your ego means nothing if you're not using it for the thing that God's giving you it to you for.
Mhm.
And yeah, so looking at someone else who maybe doesn't have a particular gift that we have, or doesn't isn't looking for that same type of intensity in life. Um, I also have this tendency. I often will, and I've pushed some people away, and you know, with a lot of intemperance because I was trying to like push someone to like go boxing with me or like to come to the gym more often and everything, and instead of looking at them as a person, I was just kind of trying to like yeah validate my own journey by
Mhm.
like if others join me in it, then I know that it's worthwhile as opposed to just recognizing it's coming from God, and that's what I need to focus on.
Yeah.
And God's gonna tell them the path they need to be on, and maybe they are supposed to go to the gym with me. That might be the case, but
Yeah.
not putting that on me so that I can just validate my own experience, pop up my ego more. I think that I'm really the purpose why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I think that's something that I think the AFF guys like Arthur and them, it's like they see inside of you what you can become and they want to bring you there. Where like the vice is saying that because I want to be here, you need to come with me. Like
yeah,
you need to be a part of my tribe because I want to build an army. Rather than saying, I think we can come to a greater place if you join me in this path. And you don't have to, but this is your free choice.
Yeah. It
That's
becomes a
the-
community versus an individual selfish journey. And the
yeah.
community is where all the value is. I mean, how like look at us, like ultimately, like as strong as you are, as physically fit as you are, as mentally tough, how much good can you do with just your hands? A lot of good.
Yeah.
But once you can bring it to the community and make other people better, who then go on to spread and make other people better too,
yeah.
the amount of good, the impact that you have on the whole, the world as a whole, it becomes incredibly easy to see. Um, it almost becomes like a simple like game of economics. It's like, you know, you have like once you hit like the math, the exponential spread and increase of like followers of God. Like, of course, why I think that is when we look at the family, that is the reason like the family has to exist so more people can worship and glorify God. And that is the reason why we need to be like working with other people in community versus like competition is great, but there is a very clear line between competition and the more competition becomes selfish because you want to be
Yeah.
seen as better, feel better, versus a community.
Yeah, when it becomes something it sets you apart over and against um your tribe, your community that you're like sharing with, and when you take these your own goods instead of giving them to the common good that's shared with the community, like and building it up, you start hoarding.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I know this time I've just kind of been like I'm doing my thing, and I don't want the distraction of other people to pull me away from that.
Mhm.
There's some truth to that. I mean, there's sometimes you just got to plug in, and you got to work on yourself, and you have to maybe forget about everything else.
Mhm.
But yeah, when you let that competition kind of like darken your soul, it doesn't
Yeah.
go anywhere.
Or both you. So Rinju, you do some boxing, correct?
I'm getting back into it, so I've been working with Nick to rehab my shoulder.
Nice.
It's kind of been an off and on problem. Like to get to the point, like I'd sneeze and my shoulder would dislocate.
Crazy.
So yeah, so I've been trying to get back into it more seriously, and um, we've gotten there at this point.
Very nice. How about you, Tom?
I haven't done boxing. I'm looking at doing jujitsu soon. My well, our mutual friend Jonathan Wrench, he's a black belt, lives in town.
Good.
I he's actually gonna do a series on the podcast here too, so I'll have to send you some
Very
stuff.
nice.
But my brother Ben is now a blue belt in jujitsu. So I'm looking into getting into it. It's just the hardest part is scheduling.
Yeah. No, it takes. Like, it's sad to say, but my life right now is eat, sleep, jujitsu, lift, fight, which I really enjoy personally. But there is no balance at all.
Yeah.
Like it's very hard for me to set aside time to hang out with my girlfriend because I enjoy straining so much. Like
Yeah.
it's hard for me, and I don't think most people would enjoy my life if I'm being honest. Like I think 95% of people would like be like, why do you live like that? But for me, it's like the only thing that I'm like kind of comfortable at. I I almost feel like my Lenten fast should be like taking fighting to an extreme because it gets so extreme to the point where it does become sort of like an icon. You start worshiping a little bit, inadvertently. But yeah, jujitsu it is great when you don't let it kill your body and your social life fully. It is phenomenal.
How long have you been doing it?
Year and a half, year and a half.
Okay.
I'm still terrible, but I'm a blue belt. I'm a terrible blue belt now. I can do leg locks, so that's
Hey,
it. Lex.
you had a fight coming up and your guy backed out, right?
Yes, I got another one.
Oh, you
He's
got another. Nice.
I'm fighting. It's a 6'2" guy, so I have to fight up a weight class now. So no weight
Right.
cut at all. For me, which will kind of be nice. But 6'2" is like I'm a short 5'10". Like I'm not tall. So I'm gonna be punching up and having to use head movement to get inside and take him down. Because I mean, ultimately, it's like he's a boxer who's done some wrestling, and so it's like I'm gonna have to play it to my strengths and just wrestle him.
Bring it to the ground.
Yeah, every time. But it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. He friended me on Facebook, which is a little weird. It's like,
Interesting. Just in case things don't go well.
yeah, for sure. He's trying to get me to go easy on him for the fight, I suppose. Which, yeah, when I did my first fight, I took the the mindset the complete opposite way. It's like I wanted to take this guy's life, and it got so dark, like it got really really bad. Towards like I won the fight afterwards and all that like hatred kind of like got lifted off because the fight is over now and it's like a what have I done type deal.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and I think from like a faith aspect too, you can't let it control you at all. Like if you are a practicing Christian who is a fighter, it has to be through like it's competition. It's not out of hate, it's not out of emotion, it's out of wanting to physically compete and then having respect for the other person too. So I'm going into this one a little bit more with a little bit healthier of a mindset. Because like the last time, it's like I can see why so many fighters end up the way they are. It's like you see Mike Tyson, it's like this terrible man, like who used to be like he was a very bad man to be in the ring with, who would go as far as to rip your ear off with his teeth, and talk about like voice how many demons he was fighting from living in that anger, that hate, and or John Jones even. I mean, like who is a practicing Christian, but it's like you hear him talk, and it's like there's obviously some dark stuff going on. So I'll never be as great as Tyson or John Jones, but I want to be a little bit healthier and much more Christ centered in my fighting.
That was actually, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on this, but I've always wondered about that. Like, how do you be a good Christian and then like be a professional fighter? Like your job literally is to hurt people.
Well, your job is to win,
Oh,
right? Like
yeah.
I think there is a difference between like yeah, I guess like you can win a fight without necessarily like you don't win by you hurt this guy more than they've hurt you, but you've won.
Okay.
And I think there is a shift. I mean, with all combat, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of related to what Musashi will talk about of the danger of preferences. You get preference one thing or over another. And hatred, when you like bring all that hatred into the fight, you're taking in preferences. So you're like, I want to hurt this person. I want this person to feel pain. That's the end goal here. And it can cloud, and you can see some fighters who like they lose with that mindset.
Mm.
You know, like it can really be to the detriment. I mean, so I think that's just to the first side about like
Okay.
the goal isn't necessarily first to hurt. I mean, you're getting there by hurting them. You're not in politics. You're not in the negotiating.
Yeah.
It's not sales.
Yeah. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, your tools are your four limbs in your head. But the end goal is not primarily I'm hurting this person. But Colin can talk about this more than I
Yeah.
can, so.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It has to, you have to view it as a physical chess match versus
Ah,
a battle to the death, which I think strong will has to be involved. And I saw it. My opponent did not give up. Like my last opponent, 9 minutes. Like he did not. He was on the beating end. I didn't take I took one hit, and there was not a single mark to show after my fight. Like it was just, I felt great. Like physically, like I trained the next day, no marks on my face. It didn't look like I got in a fight, but like he was in very bad shape afterwards. Like I was like watching the doctor examine him after the fact, and it's like I wouldn't have been surprised if there was internal bleeding just of how bad shape he was. And the fight, you have to have that fight, that drive, that heart to win. But it can't be heart to like the heart isn't there to cause you to want to take someone's life.
right.
It's you're physically competing to win, 100% to win, to be disciplined, like to be to have your arm raised at the end, but to be doing it for the chance to hurt someone is a lot different from doing it to compete. And
Yeah.
I was doing it to hurt someone initially, and which is that's the exact wrong like mindset to be in. But you have to detach from your emotions. Say you're here to be the hardest worker, to be the best striker, the best person on the ground. But at the end of the day, you're going to shake the person's hand and you're going to have respect for them. And it's not going to be for the detriment of your soul. It's going to be for the love of the sport, love of the game.
Okay.
And that was hard for me at the end because it's like I'm talking to this guy. It's like I was mean to this guy. Like I purposely went into his dressing room to like call him out. Which was
Oh, dang.
but the issue was it worked. Like it was one
Yeah.
of those things to where it's like I got in the guy's head early on. I saw him in the hallway and I'm like, "You ready to eat? You ready to eat? I can't wait. It's gonna be so fun." I just felt like this rabid animal. Got into his head and I won. And then it's like, damn, that's embarrassing. It's like even if it did cause me to win, it's like I don't want to be known for being the bully, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
but I found myself I just found myself with his coaches in the back when he was getting like cleaned up, and I'm like, I just want to apologize for how I acted. You were great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I wish you the best of luck. And so, yeah, that's how it has to be versus I'm going to take your life and your children aren't going to be able to look at their dad. Yeah, that gets real depraved real quick.
Very. I think that was a good answer. It's been something on my mind for a while. I'm like, I guess it didn't make sense, but yeah, if it's like just a place to compete, even though you may get hurt from it, it's like, if it's a mutual, I guess, agreement, I guess maybe that makes it better.
Well,
Yeah.
mutual agreement, but even like, I mean, I think some people use this in a kind of in a pansy way, but as a Christian, I'm not hating the devil either. Like my goal as a Christian is not to hate Satan, because like why am I gonna give that energy to him even in that place? Like Saint George and the Dragon, there's always like the princess and the castle and the icon as well.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, it is his combat, and that is central to like he's always he's there. He's good. He's getting the job done.
Yeah.
But like for what?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if my hatred of Satan is like overpowering my love of Christ, like I'm just it's just it just seems like purposeless.
Yeah, when there's a reason why like the biblical translation for do not kill is do not murder, and I think the big difference of killing and murdering, and I'm talking about like this isn't like necessarily it is taking someone's life, but it could be as simple as hurting, cause like fighting them in the cage. I think the difference is intention, and it is hate. I think that when you do hurt someone out of hate, it becomes murder. But when you compete with someone and you're throwing strikes, you're hitting them, you're bruising them up, out of respect and out of like want to like win through the competition, through the sport. That's what separates it from the two.
Yeah.
Same thing for soldiers. It's like when when and there's a lot of things that can be talked about in terms of like the military industrial complex and why we're fighting these wars. But when the person is overseas killing because there's this itch that he has to satisfy to where he hates the person and he's getting off on his own violence, that's murder versus the person who's doing it to prevent the bad people from causing any more harm out of a detached love for his friends and for the good people that are being saved. There has to be that difference.
That's hard to do. I think that's why you see a lot of there's so much evil associated with not just the military complex, but just even being a soldier in the military. Like the fathers of the church, they prescribe the same penances if you were murdering someone, not because they're saying what you're doing is murder, but like it's hard to kind of disassociate yourself, and like it takes a lot of virtue to be able to focus on what's behind you rather than hating what's in front of you primarily as your fuel. It's such an easy, quick fuel to use that hate, to use that. I mean, like I even just like lifting in the gym, sometimes you get that feeling of like not letting discipline be your fuel, but like that really quick fuse of just like hate this bar. Like I'm gonna, like, it's like this is murder my family. You can just get into that because it's really easy. And the farther you take that, the harder it is to pull back from that as well.
How quickly in the Bible did the first murder happen? It was the sons of Adam and Eve. It's literally like the spot on the first murder out of jealousy and hate. Love. I'm gonna be honest. Like I struggle with being compassionate. Like that's certainly my weakness. Hate comes to me a lot easier than love does, and that's something that I've realized. There's once you realize it, you can make steps to like make it not become an issue later on. But I mean, humans, like we see someone, jealousy, hatred, like there's a reason why we are as sinful as we are and why society is the way it is because being a good person is hard. Being a virtuous person is hard. It's an everyday battle. And
that's what I've loved about being with Anti-Fragile Athletes. Being in a group of guys who are just so focused on, and in fact, like recently, like Arthur has said, like he's a hard ban on politics being brought into the group. I think that's great. Not necessarily because like I'll keep away fights or whatever, because I don't think we're getting in fights or anything like that. Right. But it kind of keeps us focused. It's like what are we here for? Like we're here to train, and not just train like what we're doing in the gym, but like sometimes like talking about politics can just kind of become this like hate masturbation. Like you just like you can just like point out like the big elites and just kind of get angry at them all the time, and it's fun to do because I'm so like helpless in that scenario. It's easy. I can just say how awful they are. I'm not in the arena with them. I'm not actually doing anything actionable in my life to face them. It's just easy to hate them because keeps me away from the battles I actually have at hand. I can just
100%. Yeah, it becomes a drug, it becomes an icon. You start to worship that hate because I mean, it is very easy to hate the people you can see as evil, but once that hate does become an issue, then it starts to become the spiral downwards to where one day you might be like them if you continue this path of hate. It's like how easy is it for your soul to be corrupted? Like, oh man, like it's a slippery slope. Like the path of being like a truly evil, depraved person isn't this one big step. It's small choices that are taken over the course of could be years that start small and then grows to where it's like I am like to where you do become the person that you used to hate. From that hate. Like you look at it and it doesn't make sense. It seems to not make sense. It's like, oh, I'll never be like this person. But I think that choosing to have it like that anger, like live in your heart and inhabit you, it starts to put you on autopilot for that path that gets real dark, real fast, and real scary too.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, yeah, because like if you guys are just focusing on your like how do you improve yourselves in the community, then you're essentially building up the virtue that would prevent those types of things from happening in a large scale. Because of those men right now that are in the world doing all these terrible things, if they've been in a group, maybe they wouldn't be doing it now.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just essentially like the long-term frame of bad decisions. But if you're making the good decisions now, just focusing how do you keep making those and not worrying about the politics, you're essentially becoming the solution for those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Smart.
Yeah, when you're focusing on what your path is, um, it starts compounding on itself. It starts building up on itself.
Yeah.
That when the
Yes, being
opportunity for
real,
responsibility comes forward.
being real cognizant of the choices that you make on a daily basis to set you up to be a good person. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
which is one of the reasons why the internet is great. Well, there's just 99 reasons why, 99% of the reasons why it's a terrible thing. But ultimately, like having a community that you don't have to be like I look down my street. I don't know a single person who lives on my street because most people aren't social. They don't talk to their neighbor, which is also like my own fault for not going out and like doing it myself too. So I'm kind of adding to that problem. But having a community that you don't have to live next to or be in the same city as, um, I think is one of the blessings because I mean it gives me, I don't know how many members are in the group right now, but it gives me 58 other examples of virtuous people who are trying to be the best that they can be on a daily basis, who I can talk
Okay.
to and discuss and
Yeah.
have podcasts with.
Yeah.
And grow from too. Because I mean, I can't do it alone. I I think it's impossible to do it alone. You need people to, even if you are on the same page and like, or maybe even if they aren't as like into like their journey as you are, there's always something you can take away from them as a person. There's always something that they can give you,
Yeah.
whether it's wisdom, being a good example. I mean, Arthur's been a great example for me. He's called me out when I've really screwed up and told him. He's given me advice to move forward, and we need those people as men. Like we need those people, and it should be the father in the house. A lot of times it isn't nowadays, which is really sad. But men mentor to be fathers to other men. Like that's the exact same circuit in the brain. Whether it's like your child or like another person, it is a form of fathership that doesn't have to be because you live in the same house. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I found like we have a good community out here at Lander.
Mhm.
But in some ways, like because I'm in the group with the rest of the anti-fragile athletes. I don't try to like impose the people who are like immediately around me. Like I don't expect like my roommate to like be going to the gym with me every morning because that's not what his interests him. I don't hold him to those standards because they're not asking for it, and it kind of frees me up to like just be able to like be with them and be a good friend and a good neighbor. Um, and then I could like write in the chat like I just threw up at hardcon like yeah, that's great like
Yeah.
and people be able to there's people who get me who are also just on this just want to live this really intense life because I know I and other guys who've joined the group have really struggled with that feeling of um I want to live a hard life but everyone else around me is trying to tell me how to take it easy. That's their only
Yeah.
medicine. I don't want that
I
medicine.
I've lost so many friends just from like the intensity. And I think that they probably weren't even like real friends to begin with, but I've lost so many people who like had the title of friends
Yeah.
because I mean, like initially like you can't force that lifestyle upon someone. It's not like it becomes you're pushing it upon them out of selfishness. But at the same time it's like it's there's some things that it's just difference. You and that
Yeah.
person aren't the same. Um and there's beauty in that difference, in that the contrast between the person. But at the same time it's like it's no one, like I said earlier, there are very few people who want to live like my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a good thing ultimately because it does. I mean, there are negatives from being as extreme. We at the gym the other day, so our coach, we have this crazy coach. His name is Tom. He used to be a pro fighter. He's actually probably a psychopath, legitimately. Like probably like a
Something got
psycho.
knocked loose. Yeah.
Yeah, if he didn't have the fighting, he'd be a serial killer, 100%. Like it's he's and so he we come in one day and this was after my 3 friends lost their fights a few weeks ago. And he goes, "You guys are gonna pay for the sins of all the fighters who failed last weekend," with much more swear words. Like with that whole
Yeah.
sentence was swear words. And so normal class is from like 8:30 to 9:30, and he kept us there till 11:20. Just over and over and over again. He had us. Are any of you familiar with like Greco style Roman wrestling, where it's like pummeling for
Yeah.
underhooks, getting
Yeah.
double underhooks? He had us fight for underhooks for like an hour and a half straight, like till like it was. We had 3 people throw up and 3 people leave with torn tendons and ligaments. Like
Wow.
it's pretty crazy. And
Whoa.
that was looking at that was one of the things where it's like I'm an extreme person, but I'm like, and I had fun because I mentally was able to like push myself
You
through
can
that
take
whole
it. Yeah.
workout and take it and have some fun with it too. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, that was like in terms of like being reasonably healthy and non-damaging, it's like that was kind of stupid. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't a good thing. Like ultimately, like I'm a huge fan of suffering, but like looking at how far that got pushed, I'm like, yeah, there's some extremes that are a little too extreme, maybe. Like when people are getting injured, and throwing up in the cage. It's like, even if I can get through it, it's like I don't maybe they weren't meant to be here. Like that's or maybe the training was a little too masochistic. But
And
yeah,
some of
and
it, like you were saying, like you had the conditioning to be able to take that.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's the definition of anti-fragility, right? Being able to take more and more chaos and volatility and like take it into yourself and like assimilate it and make you more powerful. And there's some people who just are, farther behind on the journey or farther ahead. And like losing friends, there's one way of losing friends where it's just like, you know, you both just are like, all right, screw that. You're not a real friend. We're out. Like you just cutting friends off. There's other losing friends where sometimes like you're just running ahead of them. And like there's always gonna be that warmth and friendship there, but also like um yeah, you just lose touch in some ways because your lives just can't really relate in the same sort of way. There's a truth to that. And
yeah,
and it's sad sometimes, but some of it's just not even whether one person's better than the other, but just like you're in really different paths. And going back to what you're saying, this psychotic gym session, training session, like some of it is also like, yeah, for some people it can be a damaging, like traumatizing. Like trauma is not being able to process and take in that volatility,
Mhm.
right? It's kind of like you hit you flew too high up to the sun.
Yeah.
But for some, it can be a great experience, and all the work you put in beforehand is gonna show up in those moments. I don't
100%.
know if this is what your coach had in mind, but maybe.
I think he just wanted to hurt us, like when he
Yeah,
was
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
he
so
was
it
he was just
sounds like,
mad. He was mad that everyone failed and sullied the name of the gym. Uh
yeah, yeah,
And the thing is, he's an incredible coach. Like he has given me so much. So his thing is he'll kill you in the workouts, but afterwards, if you truly had heart and didn't give up, he's gonna give you like his access to his base of knowledge and work with you and
yeah,
teach you. And I think he has respect. And like I said, I'm by no means a great fighter, but I think he has respect for the heart that I show. Um, and it was interesting though because we're pummeling for underhooks, trying to get double underhooks, and it's a competition. He wants us to. I think I don't know what he wanted us to scream once we got double underhooks and then reset and then keep on pummeling for double underhooks. But this is a war. Like we are. Like there's a few videos from that training session to where it's like it looks like gorillas just attacking each other because of how hard we're going. And there's some people there who you felt them snap, you felt them give up, and then they weren't even though we were both like physically drained at the same level, they stopped giving it their all. They let you get momentum, and then they let their negative momentum, the losing momentum, just grow. And
yeah.
eventually, that person just
Pounding.
left, just walked out of the gym. He disappeared. We heard the door close, and he was gone.
Yeah,
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
it reminds me a little bit of I was talking with Rinju, he showed me this clip. I don't, do you know of Alex Hormozy, Colin?
Maybe the name sounds familiar.
Okay. He has like long black hair, big beard, super jacked. Um, he's like one of the top young entrepreneurs in the world right now.
Okay.
But he was on the Chris Williamson podcast and they're talking about pain. And Alex was talking about how when you're a young person, You know, when we're babies and kids, we're told to avoid pain because it's going to hurt us. So like we can't grow. It's like once we reach maturity, we have to remember that we have to go into that pain to grow further. So it's almost like a flip, you know, like when there's
Yeah.
a certain point in your life, you're like, okay, now I'm mature enough to actually face the pain and face the chaos, kill the dragons, so that life can continue. You know,
Yeah.
my dad did it for me while I was growing up, so now I can fight the dragon. But it's interesting because like it's so easy to feel like when you're in the pain in the zone, it's not worth it and you're not going to get anywhere. Like you're pounding, but nothing is breaking. Like the
Yeah.
evil you see isn't breaking, but it's like just that I won't stop fighting that actually will break the wall or kill the dragon or whatever, you know.
100%.
I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
it's a cool perspective because I never heard that before, and I thought, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
When
I
you,
think
if you,
what,
if you look at pain as straight the enemy, yeah, you're not gonna,
yeah,
you're just gonna be running your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
100%. Yeah. No, once you can sort of, once it becomes, instead of looking at the final goal of, okay, at the top of the mountain is this amount of money, this physical look, once you look at the mountain as this journey is the gift that I get to go on, and it might result in this win at the end, but ultimately like the majority of dopamine that we get from going like reaching a goal isn't reaching the goal, it's the journey, it's the process of achieving, process of working
Yeah.
towards it. That's why so many people, they make their million and then they retire, they get the nice car and they feel empty at the end of the day because they think that the car, the $1 million, the nice home is going to give them this feeling of joy that's carried on. And you might get a little bit of dopamine from that, but the vast majority of it's through the hard work. And I can tell you at the end of that session, I was in literal like joy. Like when it ended, I was happy that it ended, but at the same time, it's like I had given it my all. Like
Yeah.
I there was
All on the
nothing left
table.
for me to give. Like
Yeah.
I had maxed out the effort that I could attribute towards that session, and that was a beautiful thing. And
Mm-hmm.
even if I hadn't had given it my all, and people had still thought that I gave it my all, I would have that voice in the back of my head that told like that knew like you gave up, you you stopped trying as hard as you could have, even if don't
Yeah.
people don't see it. I still know that I failed to give 100%. And that voice for me is much louder than anyone else telling me that like you failed. Like that voice for me is like there's been times where it's like I've been driving. I had this my last job, I opened a Culver's. I was part of a team that had to open a Culver's. And it was a massive, massive undertaking. And I would work. We had this week where I think we had a few weeks of like 90 to 100 hours of work just because that's how what it was to get the store up and running. And I'd find myself driving home, a 45-minute drive at the end of the day, 1:30 in the morning to get back up at 7:45 in the morning and do it all over again. And it's like I promised myself I'd go to the gym earlier in the day, and I would switch. All right, I'll take a rest day. It'll be fine. And then as I'm pulling into my home, it's like I made myself a promise here. It's like even if no one else knows that I quit today, I made myself a promise that I turned my back on, and ultimately I slapped myself in the face by not doing this. And I'm going to the gym, and it was great. I had so much fun that week because that week was zero sleep, but I still managed to train every single day, work this amount of work, and break down excuses. And it was beautiful. It sucked, but it was beautiful. Like when I think back to my happy space, it was running down the main street of my city at 2:45 in the morning doing like an 8-mile run. Like that's the happiest I think I've ever been. Like legitimately. Like it was great. Then wake up and do it all over again. So much fun.
I was having that battle this morning. Like,
Yeah.
I got out at 3, partially because I couldn't sleep, but I had to drive someone to the airport. And then right when I got back into town, I was just saying like, I can work out later in the day. Really, what else? I wasn't gonna. I actually don't have time later in the day, so it was more of just like I can push it later and still feel good about myself. And I was really close to just not going.
Mm.
And I'm for the sake of the podcast, I'm glad I was able to say I did. But no, but no, really, no, really for myself, I just like it's a when when you're having that battle with yourself, it's so much better place to be than having to always have like that external fuel kind of inspiration or I don't know, like fears, like external fears of like people looking down on you. Like if that's gonna go away at a certain point, like you're not gonna
Yeah.
it's not gonna last.
It has to be you. Like
Yeah.
it's like that ghost mode in Mario Kart. Like
Yeah.
you set the pace, and then it's like you'll spend days trying to beat the ghost. Like, cause
Yeah.
it's that's how it has to be. And that's what my coach, like, he used that analogy to where it's like, he's like, if I die, you 3 months on the line, you'll forget about me. He's like, it has to be like, you can't do it for other people's approval. You can't do it for your friends, your family. They love you, but they will ultimately, like, you'll start to inhabit less and less and less of their mental space when you do pass. So it has to be you. It has to be a battle of you versus you. And without anyone else doing it for their approval or whatnot too. Um, yeah, it was funny. There's this one I went on this with this really good wrestler on my team, and so last year, him and I was like, "Hey, I'm doing an 8 mile run tomorrow. You should come with." It's like it's gonna suck, but it'll be fun. And he makes it 5.5 miles in, and he goes, "All right, I think I'm gonna call it here." And I remember telling him, "I'm like, do you want to give up and know that you gave up, or do you want to choose to suffer and like live and have this be set the pace for the rest of the day, the week, the month, the year by choosing to finish this?" And he goes, he says, "I think I'm just going to quit." And then I continue my run because I'm going to do my 8 miles. And then 2 minutes later, I hear pounding feet down the road behind me. And he's like, "I couldn't do it." And I was like, "My man." It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. He knew he gave up. He knew he had more. And he finished that 8 mile run and he felt great.
Man, that's why St. Paul uses like combat and like running, like athleticism. I mean, it's in asceticism and athleticism. It's not in St. Paul. It's like the entire church uses this language. Like,
Yeah.
I fought the good fight. I've won the race. He's saying that when he's like facing martyrdom at the end. Um, he can only say that because he put himself on the arena. He put himself for that, and you again, you don't have to. You can be a really holy person without going to the gym, but it's just so easy to like athletics is just such a great way to build up discipline in your life.
Yeah.
It's such a great way to. It's one of the it's so easy to like be able to live a disciplined life if you are pushing yourself in the gym.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't mean you're going to be disciplined in every part of your life, but I found it's the simplest way. I know, like Arthur always says, the ones or zeros, and like, is it a zero? Like, okay, did I put the work in? All right, like, it's gonna keep like, compounding to every part of my life. Force
Oh, yeah.
multipliers,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that to look for an easy life is the epitome of what we're meant to be. It's the exact opposite of what we're meant to be. We have to search for the hard. And just because something is hard doesn't mean it's good at the same time.
Right.
But to live a life to where it's like you're not afraid to get your hands dirty and to get in the mud, of real of grit and just sacrifice, whether it's your time, energy, or all time, energy, physical, um, mental comfort, you have to choose the harder route. Otherwise, your full potential will be you will be a shadow of what your full potential could be at the end of your life. And I know Goggins, he had this thing to where he's like, if I die and like the person God pulls me aside and is like, this is the person you could be. Um, Same for me. I want to be 100% of my potential.
Yeah.
There's no other route than the 100% of my potential in all venues, my faith, my relationship, my physical, mental strength, my discipline. I want to be the person who can persevere the longest and do the most good.
Yeah. I think honestly, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, why is it that a lot of the really good things are after a hard trial? Like, why is it that God puts a lot of deserts in our life? And I think it's because he wants to show us how we can really choose what's good. I think he's asking us, how badly do you want what's good?
Yeah.
And then if every time a little thing comes up or a big thing comes up and we say, I still want what's good, I want to navigate through this, I want to find the way through, then he's like, okay, now you can get it. Because I think it's essentially like our time on earth is actually asking us, how well do we choose? Like, how well do we decide and use our
Yeah.
freedom?
And
Yeah.
even like, yeah, there can be a good thing in front of you, and you can choose it badly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
before every feast, big feast in the church, there's always a fasting, either fasting season or like a day of fasting right up to it. And it's not like, so now you can earn the treats, but I think it's also so you can take it properly. So you can
Mm.
feast properly. Like
Mhm.
you can enjoy Pascha, you can enjoy Easter properly because of this gift of Lent to help
Yeah.
you with that.
Yeah.
They had
No,
Easter before they had Lent, but like they knew.
nothing worth it is easy. Nothing worth
Yeah,
it.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And at the same time, too, I mean, look at our brains. It's like if you live a life of comfort and luxury 100% of the time, your baseline is going to be so low compared to the person who grinds, works hard, wakes up at 4 in the morning to put in the effort, who fasts, who goes to church, who puts the time aside for his family, and then can see the fruits of his effort show themselves in his beautiful family later down the line, the people who care about him, the good that he's doing, maybe, and at a more like visual and monetary side of things, the beautiful house he has, who he's able that he worked for, that he put forth. If it was all the worst thing that the thing that I am very glad I didn't end up with was, I mean, nothing was given to me. Like, I mean, I had a great family, which is a blessing, but like parents aren't rich. My physical body wasn't easy. Like none of it was easy, and that's the most
You have any
beautiful thing about it.
shortcuts?
No shortcuts.
Yeah.
It was all earned through a very long period of like putting effort, significant effort down, and I'm able to enjoy it because of that, but still understand that there's more work to be done. Like it's not like because it wasn't handed to me, I can appreciate it. And if
And that
you
was a gift from God,
yes,
not handing
yes,
it to you.
Yeah.
not handing it to me. Exactly. Yeah. So I honestly like when I look at like all uh these kids who just grow up as millionaires, billionaires just from right from the bat, people see it as like, oh, I wish I was them. They must be living like so happy. There's a reason why many of them are alcoholics, narcotic users, end up
Mhm.
killing themselves. There's a huge reason, and it's because they didn't have to struggle. And
Yeah.
there's beauty in the struggle. And there always will be beauty in the
And
struggle.
if you like, I lived in Europe a bit. If you meet nobility out there, the one like the best noble families are the ones that their whole way, the way they train their kids, it's like you are a servant. Everything you've been given is not yours. It is
Mm.
to be used for others. They
Mm.
have to train them
100%.
that way, or else they're just gonna sit on their laurels, and rest in the laurels,
Yes, sir.
and it's gonna be agony.
Yeah. Mm.
I gotta head out.
Alrighty. Well, it was great to have you guys on. I really appreciate you taking the time, both of you,
Of
and
course.
This is
great
great.
conversation. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's my pleasure.
Colin and I we've been in the chat together, but we actually haven't like had a conversation like this. So this is good.
Oh,
This
cool.
was really great. I appreciate you
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
having
yeah.
me. It was great meeting both of you. And yeah, Rinju, it's been cool to have the face and voice to attribute the training stuff with together. So I appreciate
Yeah,
you guys both giving me the time
likewise.
to talk. It's a
Yeah.
blessing.
And soon we'll have Tom in the group.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yes,
Plan that.
sir.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, guys. God bless.
God bless.